Welcome back to the next in our series on the introduction to financial services industry. For this section, we're going to talk a little bit about the role of the depository and the clearing corp. And again, I'm gonna bore you by going through this disclaimer just to let everybody know this is meant for an introduction purposes only, and that there's no financial advice being provided here. So let's first talk about the depository. I think in the participant video, I mentioned the depository. I talked a little bit about what the depositories do. And basically, depository is a place where something is deposited for security purposes, right? I think everybody understands that. The thing in our business, the securities industry, why do you use a depository? You deposit securities into the depository for the purpose of clearing, settling, or possibly for security borrowing and lending. Sometimes, as I think you probably know, you could have a hedge fund that has a big position, and maybe they need to borrow securities to cover settlement on some short selling or some other leverage strategy. So where there is borrowing and lending of securities going on, the securities have to be put into the depository to make sure that they're kept safe during the process until the transaction is complete. But basically, what we're going to be focused on is a depository is a place where securities are held or cash is held. So that's cash or securities as part of the settlement and clearing process. And the other thing is the clearing corporations. Now, we talked about this, and it varies from market to market and from country to country, but clearing corporations is an organization associated with the exchange to handle confirmation, settlement, and delivery of transactions, fulfilling the main obligation to ensure transactions are made in a prompt and efficient manner, right? That's really it. They're there to make sure that we go through the delivery of the securities and the clearing and settling of the securities in a clear and efficient manner, right? They want to make sure that everything runs smoothly, that the buyers and the sellers are all represented. Now, the way it's set up, and you'll see this as I go through the slide, in most cases, the clearing corporation becomes the buyer to every seller and the seller to every buyer. And you'll see that in a minute when I bring up my slide. They create offsetting positions for every client transactions. And we talked about how Canada has the Canadian Depository, OCC is the Options Clearing Corporation, DTCC operates both as a depository and a clearing corporation in the United States. And it's actually one of the reasons why the US market is so incredibly efficient. In other countries, there isn't necessarily a clearing corporation infrastructure in place. Sometimes it's global custodians function as the clearing agent, the clearing corporation. So I'm going to give you an example here. This is a homemade example, so please don't send me 50 emails about how lousy it is. But I'm going to talk about green broker and red broker. What happens is green broker and red broker, let's say green broker and red broker each have transactions in a particular security, and green broker is buying securities. And at the end of the day, they figure out that in order to cover all the securities they're buying, they've got a certain amount of cash that they need to have to cover the purchase of the securities. And red broker is selling, and he knows at the end of the day that he has so many shares that are going to have to be delivered to cover the settlement of those securities. So what happens is green broker issues instructions to his custodian that says, hey, I've got so much cash is going to have to be put into the depository at the end of the day, into my box at the depository. And red broker issues instructions to his custodian that says, hey, I've got so many shares that have to be put on deposit in my box at the depository. That's what they call the accounts at depository. They call it at the DTC. They call it your box account. So green broker who's buying says, "Hey, I need this." He instructs the custodian to move a certain amount of cash to the depository, and red broker instructs his custodian to move a certain number of shares. Now, obviously, this isn't done on a one transaction basis. What's happened is green broker, red broker, in working with the clearing corp and the exchanges, has figured out they've netted everything down, and they know what they have to net settle against the street, against the depository. So what happens is the custodian, following the instructions, is going to move green broker's cash and put it on deposit in the depository for safekeeping. So the depository is a trusted third party. He's a neutral third party, and he's going to represent, he's going to get the cash, and he's going to also receive the shares. Now, what would happen if the cash doesn't move and the shares don't move? Then you have a trade fail. Then the depository, then there'd be notification about the broker say, "Hey, you owe cash to settle and clear these securities, or you owe shares to settle and clear." So the depository receives the cash and the shares. And it doesn't happen all at the same time. It doesn't happen all at once, but it has to happen within the settlement period, whether that's T+1 or T+2 or T+3, whatever it is for that market and product. And then we talked about the clearing corporation. The depository gets all the cash and securities on deposit. What does the clearing corporation do? The clearing corporation is receiving the netted out transactions. It's receiving the transactions both from the, it's going to gather up all the data from the brokers and from the exchanges, and it's going to take everything out. It's going to net it all out, and it's going to figure out who owes what it all should be, right? And once the clearing corporation determines that, okay, green broker, yeah, that's the correct amount of money to be deposited. And red broker, that's the correct amount of shares for deposit, right? Once it verifies that everything is correct and it's provided information to all the notified parties, and if they're owed security, the brokers are notified what they have to make sure it gets delivered. The clearing broker, once it sees that everything has been correctly at the clearing broker, the clearing corporation, once it sees that everything is correct, he notifies the depository. And at that point, the depository says, okay, well, I now know that I can release the cash to red broker and the shares to green broker. So that's what happens. The depository then lets the shares that are owed to green broker are moved to his custodian bank, and the cash that's owed to red broker is moved to red broker's custodian account. Now, if we go back here a second, let's take a step back to this stage. At this stage, where the clearing corp is getting all this information, if there's a problem, the clearing corp is dealing with the clearing broker to determine if there's a problem, and if there's a problem, to get it resolved. So the operations staff at green and red broker, they're working during this period to make sure that all the correct shares are delivered, all the correct cash is delivered, and that everything is happening on schedule. Now, remember too is brokers, they're in a hard position here because on the one hand, they want to get, if it's, let's say, T+2, they know that they have a deadline that they have to get this completed by, or else the trades will fail. And then they're going to get regulatory fines and they're going to have problems. They have to get everything delivered, but they also don't want to deliver things too early. So if you've got cash and the trade settles in 2 days, you don't want to put the cash in today. You want to wait until you have to put the cash up, because you want to have that cash out there working the street or earning for you. So the clearing brokers work, their back office is working during this period to make sure everything is appropriately moving forward. And that is the explanation I have. That's my homemade slide to explain the role of of what the broker is doing there, the clearing broker, and what's the role of the depository and the clearing corp. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, please send me at the address listed here. And you also see my LinkedIn profile. And then it's on to the next video. Thank you very much.